want to share a few words on this Yizkor Shavuot morning. I was able to exit Manhattan recently, and I headed up to the Berkshires of Manhattan, where I found myself on a 2-lane country road. And to the side, there was a sign that read, "Narrow bridge ahead." And seeing this, I could not help but think of the words of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, who was famously quoted as saying, "Kol ha'olam kulo gesher tsar ma'od vayikar lo lafached klal." The entire world is a very narrow bridge. And the most important thing is to not be afraid. Now, I didn't need this road sign to remind me of the teaching of Rabbi Nachman. Seeing it was more of an affirmation of the narrow bridge I feel like I and the whole world have been existing on since the seriousness of the COVID-19 crisis took hold. And the ending part of his teaching, where he says the most important part is not to be afraid. This, my friends, is the definition of aspirational writing. It would be impossible for most of us to not be afraid if we found ourselves on an endless, narrow bridge, just as it has been impossible for most of us to not be afraid during this pandemic. Understandably, we are concerned for our health and that of our loved ones and our neighbors, those we know and those we do not know. We are keenly aware that our mortality is right before us. The stories within our Torah, in particular, the 4th book of the Torah known as Bamidbar, or in the wilderness, speaks of how vulnerable our ancestors felt as they traveled in the desert on the way to ancient Israel. Now, you'd think they might be feeling quite good. They had been freed from slavery. They were closer to any generation of our people to the Almighty. And yet, they were petrified. They were human. Even the close presence of God could not remove their fear. But they persevered. They embraced Moses' charge to them of chazak ve'ematz, to be strong and courageous. And they found their way forward despite the fact that they were scared. And so it has been for us. Each of us has had to find courage within to endure what has passed, and no doubt we will need additional strength to face what is to come. We have been brave out of necessity. We've been brave for our children, our parents, our friends, and ourselves. We've been brave for our neighborhood and our synagogues and our country. And I'm sure the tales of our courage during this time will be told for generations. And it struck me as I've been admiring the courage of those around me, and as we approach this special Shavuot festival service and Yizkor remembrance liturgy within it, that our loved ones that we remember today also had times in their lives when they had to be brave. When I think of my friends and family who have departed, I find myself remembering wonderful periods that I spent with them. And yes, I admit that sometimes I also get fixated on the moments when they annoyed me as well. But I haven't reflected much on when they had to face terrible times. No doubt each of our dear ones found themselves upon bridges that were quite narrow. Some of these stories we're aware of, and some we may never be so. We are living at a time, I believe, where we should be telling their stories of courage to ourselves and each other. My guess is for your loved ones, I know it was true for mine, that they didn't prioritize talking about when they had to be brave. I had to inquire of them of these stories. I had to drag it sometimes out of them. So this week, I asked many of you this question. Tell me about when your loved one of blessed memory was courageous. And I'd like to take a few moments to read some of the stories that you sent me in response to this question. Donna told me of when her father enlisted in the Army as a medic in World War II. He left his pharmacy in Brooklyn to serve. During a battle, he was delivering medicine in a Jeep where he was a passenger. The Jeep was struck. The driver died. And her dad survived with his wrist so badly damaged that he described his hand just hanging off his arm. And yet he still delivered the medicine, later earning a bronze medal for his bravery. When Nadine's grandmother was a teen living near Warsaw, Poland, rumors spread that a pogrom was about to take place against the Jews in her town. Her family barricaded themselves in their house as best they could, and that night she observed bands of hoodlums painting red crosses on the doors of Jewish homes in the neighborhood. The crosses served as a marker of the houses that would be later attacked. Without telling her parents, she risked her life and sneaked out after she thought the painters had left and somehow removed the paint from the door of her home so that she and her family could be safe. They were spared being attacked. My friend Paul's father and 3 sisters survived Auschwitz. One of his aunts carried her sister on her back for parts of the death march in January of 1945, saving her life. Steve's great aunt Alice crossed the Atlantic from Italy alone as an 8-year-old girl in 1913. Alice lived until the age of 98. 33 years ago, Carol met a Danish man named Preben Munch Nielsen, who as a teenager living in Denmark hid 15 Jews in his fishing village and then rowed them to safety into Sweden. Carol invited Preben to her son's bar mitzvah many years ago. And when her son mentioned his heroic act in his Devar Torah, Preben arose from the pew in the sanctuary and said, "No, I am not a hero. I only did the decent thing for people in trouble." Laura's mother in 1933, in the heart of the Depression, ended her marriage with her husband, Laura's father, who was unfortunately a toxic presence in their home. Her mom had 3 young children. Laura was the youngest to raise, and her mom raised them so well with the help of her parents, whom she moved in with after the divorce. Christine's husband, Mike, fought his brain cancer valiantly, even as it began to impact his abilities across all aspects of his life. He strove to protect his family during all of this, even when he was the one in need of protection. And Joel's grandmother, Zelda, was a survivor of breast cancer. At age 57, she initially had a single mastectomy and then endured a second mastectomy surgery. She would attend Jewish women's gatherings in the Boston area, stand up, and announce that she was a breast cancer survivor long before cancer support groups existed. This was during a time when the word cancer was often said in a whisper. Zelda welcomed people to speak with her, and she gave them emotional support and insight on how to live after mastectomy surgery. And there are so many more stories. When we next speak, ask me to tell you about Marcel, or ask me to tell you about Tanya's grandfather, Arrigo, and Pam's grandmother, Eva. You can actually read some of these stories if you go to my Facebook page and friend me. I would love for you to share yours as well. And I was reminded from these tales and many more that courage presents itself in a wide range of ways, some that might seem bigger than others, but let us not be confused. Courage is courage, and our loved ones of blessed memory demonstrated it, and so can we. I'll actually rephrase that. So have we already throughout our lives, and so will we. We too can be chazak, be'ematz, strong and of good courage. So I ask you this Yizkar Shavua morning, do you know anecdotes of how your loved ones navigated through their worst of times? And when was the last time you told these stories with your family and friends? Now is the right time to do so. And do not be shy to tell me about them as well. Not only do I want to know these stories, they gird me with the strength I absolutely need at this time. As we remember today our parents, our siblings, our children, our family, friends, and fellow congregants this Shavuot, let us find more ways to harness a bit of the courage they demonstrated years ago, and may our doing so help us feel their presence at our side as we attempt to cross the very narrow bridges that lie ahead for us.